For the past 2 years, I have been living in Stockholm, Sweden, and because of this, I've been able to discover new cultures, explore different customs, and it's given me a more expanded and complete view on the world as a whole. Now that I'm going back to America, I realize that living in and traveling around Europe has been an unbelievable experience, and one that I'll never forget. My travels to Sweden also happened to coincide with the time I became a hardcore coaster enthusiast. And so, as you might have guessed, during those 2 years I made an effort to get out to a bunch of different parks around Europe, and I did. I visited 27 theme parks all across the continent and was able to experience over 170 different roller coasters. So today I'm going to count down the top 25 coasters that I rode in Europe. And yes, I know this is pretty bad timing because a certain other YouTuber recently posted the same thing, but that's the way it works sometimes, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Before we get started, here are a few quick disclaimers. First off, this list is my opinion based on the experiences that I personally had. Second, I obviously did not ride every roller coaster in the continent of Europe, although I do think I was able to get on pretty much every truly world-class one aside from Gotham City Escape. I visited theme parks in Sweden, Finland, Spain, Denmark, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, the UK, Poland, and France. On the screen right now is every park I went to and some of the major coasters at those parks that I missed. But that's enough of an intro, let's get into the list. These are the top 25 roller coasters in Europe. Starting off the list is Stealth at Thorpe Park. This was my favorite coaster in the UK when I visited this spring, so it'll be the only one you see on this list. Stealth has the same short layout as a lot of other accelerator coasters by Intamin. I was a bit underwhelmed by Red Force, but Stealth on the other hand delivered like I hoped it would. The hydraulic launch is one of the best launches in Europe, if not the best, giving a sudden and powerful acceleration. But it's what comes after that allows Stealth to crack this list. The pull-up into the top hat is an extremely intense moment and one that had me graying out every single time. I used the Ride Forces app because I'm a complete nerd, and this moment would always register at or near 5 Gs, it's really that good. The top hat itself is great too, with strong airtime and laterals on the descent. The rest of the layout after that consists of a valley and brake run. Stealth is way too short to place higher in my rankings, but the elements it does have are awesome, which is why it makes this list at number 25. Up next is Black Mamba. Unlike a certain other coaster at Fantasyland where you hang under the track and has great theming, Black Mamba is not overrated. It's a very solid invert with great forces and theming. It's definitely the best of the smaller scale B&M inverts I've done, easily outclassing Nemesis, Inferno, and Monster due to its intense positive Gs and strong set of inversions. I found this one to be vastly better in the front row because of the accentuated forces and clear view of the lush landscaping, so I strongly recommend that row, even if you can't figure out how waiting for it actually works. Black Mamba does meander a bit towards the end, but there's a powerful helix to finish, and the first half is so strong that it earns its spot at number 24. At number 23 is another B&M invert, Osiris at Parc Asterix. I found that this coaster and Black Mamba share a lot of similarities, which is why they place next to each other on this list. They're both B&M inverts with a fantastic first half, great theming and near misses, die down a bit towards the end, and are much better in the front row. Osiris itself feels like a much newer style of invert with its unique layout and different sense of power than the older ones. It's hard to describe, but Osiris does things its own way, and along with Monster at Gröna Lund, is probably the most different B&M invert that I've ridden. I love it due to its first half that never lets up from the drop to the trench, and fantastic forces that are felt throughout. Osiris is an awesome invert and a great example of why this is one of the best coaster models out there. Colossus at Heide Park takes 22nd. I know this is a coaster that a lot of people think more highly about, but I didn't find it had the raw power and ejector airtime I was hoping for. Despite that, I still loved Colossus. It's super fun and re-rideable with some great moments of floater in there. To me, it kind of feels like a wooden B&M hypercoaster. The first few hills offer strong airtime, there's a turnaround and helix towards the middle, and it ends with some weaker floater pops. It's glass smooth, not too intense, and overall a super fun ride. Unlike those B&Ms though, Colossus runs pretty inconsistently. The first few elements are great, but it fizzles out immediately after those camelbacks. The double helix is a massive dead spot, and every hill following the turnaround offers nothing more than moderate floater. Like I said, it's really good enough to earn a spot on this list, but whenever I really think about Colossus, I get a bit frustrated because it could be much more. Now from one of the more overrated coasters in Europe to one of the most underrated. Dragon Con is really good and comes in at number 21. It's one of the more intense B&Ms out there and is the best sit down by a noticeable margin, blowing away Kumba and Wildfire and being a good bit better than Hulk. It's honestly one of my favorite B&Ms in general. I can't think of an inversion in the entire continent that's better than that unbelievably whippy 0G roll, and the rest of the ride doesn't let up either. The other inversions aren't stellar like that one is, but they're still pretty powerful. The alleged rattle isn't nearly as bad as other coasters of the same model, and I barely got any headbanging at all. Dragon Con gets overshadowed a lot by Shambhala, but it's an awesome ride in its own right. For this to be at number 21 just speaks to how good the coasters above it are. Terran is a ride that grew on me more and more as I continued to ride it, and it fits neatly into the number 20 spot on this list. Unfortunately though, this is another one of those rides that I didn't feel was as good as other people have said. Yes, the theming and terrain usage is outstanding, and there's some really good moments in there. Yet while I found the first half of each half, so the first and third quarters of the ride, to be awesome, Terran struggles to keep its pace all the way until the end. This change of quality is especially noticeable in the first half, where the first few elements are awesome, but the rest of the half is filled with what feels like meandering. I don't know if this was done on purpose so that riders could appreciate the theming, but the ride as a whole would be a lot better if Terran didn't have those obvious dead spots. But what Terran lacks in elements, it makes up for in enjoyment. This ride is so fun. I can't exactly pinpoint why or how, but speeding through Klugheim and the twisted mess of track, crossing over multiple times is a feeling unlike anything else in the world. If it did a bit more with its layout, I'm sure I'd have as high of an opinion regarding Terran as some others, but for now it comes in 20th. If I had to describe Woden Timber Coaster at Europa Park in one word, it would be relentless. This is the perfect example of what GCI stands for, and it's my favorite traditional Woody in Europe, not counting Wildfire. More so than Troy or Wicker Man, Woden absolutely flies through its layout, refusing to let up. The first drop is surprisingly very good, and throughout the course you're bombarded with extreme laterals and some quick airtime pops, especially in the second half. I'm usually not the biggest fan of GCIs, but Woden blew me away. It's the best ride at Europa Park, a top 3 coaster in Germany, and in my opinion, the 19th best in all of Europe. Going back to B&Ms, my favorite invert in Europe is Katoon at Energylandia. I feel like this is the quintessential large-scale invert. It doesn't really have any quirks aside from the drop, it just relies on raw power and delivers in every aspect. Katoon's super intense, the inversions are amazing, the drop gives some decent floater, it's just got everything you could want in an invert. Despite the mid-course, it keeps its speed all the way until the end, and my favorite moment on Katoon is that second corkscrew just before the ending helix. I'm not the biggest B&M fanboy like some others who have appeared on the channel, but if you love inverts, Katoon is definitely one of the best of the model. Next up at number 17 is Alpina Blitz at Nigloland. Nigloland isn't exactly a destination park for many people visiting Europe, but I found it to be well worth a visit due to its charming atmosphere and solid ride lineup that's headlined by this powerhouse of a coaster. The original Mach Mega Coaster is compact with a nearly identical layout to the Intamin Megalites and features strong airtime as well as moments of intense positive Gs. Like Piraten, it does what it can with the space it's in, and despite its short duration and height, Alpina Blitz uses what it does have to the best of its abilities and is a truly wonderful ride. One spot higher is another Mach coaster, this being Helix at Liseberg. This placement might seem low to some people, but from my experiences, this is definitely the range I'd put it in. Helix has a very long layout and uses the terrain to its advantage. It's really a one-of-a-kind coaster. Everyone knows that the launches accelerate slower than a car being pushed from behind up a hill, but I was fully expecting that and it doesn't really affect my view of it. What does hurt it a bit for me is that some of the elements feel just a bit stale. Helix has 7 inversions, and while it's fun to go through them, I found that most were lacking in significant force. The airtime moments are absolutely fantastic, but I just wish some of those earlier inversions had a bit more power to them, that's all. Overall though, Helix is still awesome and an easy number 2 coaster in Sweden. Now into the top 15, we have my favorite B&M in Europe, Shambhala. This is a massive hypercoaster at PortAventura World that combines with Dragon Con to create a visually stunning skyline. Shambhala itself feels like a near-perfect hyper. The drop and subsequent camelback give really sustained floater airtime, the hills toward the end offer some as well, and the speed hill is the strongest moment of ejector airtime I've felt on any B&M. But what really makes this ride for me is the unexpected moments of positives. Both the first valley in the tunnel and the ampersand turnaround had me consistently graying out, and it's those two moments that prove Shambhala is more than just a floater airtime machine. B&M Hypers will always be fantastic rides, and Shamball is about the best the model can get. I love this coaster. Coming in at number 14 is Phoenix at Sommerland. This new-gen Vekoma was the perfect fit for a park in need of a true standout coaster. Despite Phoenix's layout with inversions and airtime moments, it feels like a ride that could be enjoyed by everyone. It's not too intense, unlike another Vekoma we'll see later, and even though I'd prefer a bit more intensity, this level was definitely the perfect balance for this particular park. The first drop is great, it's decently whippy, overall Phoenix is just pure fun. It's one of the smoothest coasters out there, the inversions are awesome, and the airtime moments hit. There's nothing I can really knock this ride for because it's exactly what it was intended to be, and it's awesome. One spot higher is a Danish coaster that does deliver in terms of positives and ejector airtime. Piraten is an Untamed megalite at Djurs Sommerland. The airtime on this is just so strong. Those 3 consecutive S-hills are great on Alpina Blitz, but Mach doesn't do it quite like Untamed, and here they're some of the best airtime moments in the country. The first turn and camelback after the S-hill are fantastic, even if the first drop and that elevated S-hill aren't too great. The valleys are powerful, the ending hills are awesome, but once again the main problem with this ride is that it's a bit short. I know it's supposed to be compact, but I personally would have liked to see a few more elements which could have even pushed Piraten into my top 10. But as of now, it's still a beast of a ride that proves a coaster doesn't have to be super fast, tall, or long in order to provide an elite experience. iSpeed takes our next spot. Much like Piraten, this is a powerful old-school Untamed with great airtime and positive Gs. The reason why I put iSpeed ahead is because its layout is much more varied. The launch is amazing, I love the top hat, and those 2 inversions are fantastic. It hauls through the first half, flying through airtime hills and viciously whippy transitions, easily living up to its race car theme. iSpeed's layout overall is stellar, even if the section after the mid-course is a pretty big letdown. This ride may not end with a bang, but the first half alone carries iSpeed into the upper half of this list, and this is the best coaster in Italy. Another powerhouse of a ride, are you noticing a theme, is Lek Coaster at Legendia, which comes in at number 11. This one focuses much more on positive forces than anything else, and it absolutely succeeds in that regard. Many of the turns were really intense, but that first section from the bottom of the drop all the way to the twisted airtime hill is one of the most strong and sustained grayouts I've had on a coaster. It's 6 straight seconds where you're blasted with positives, and I absolutely love it. The second half, though, after the roll through the station, feels a bit uninspired. The forces are still there, but I wish the elements in that section had more variety to them. It's just some helixes and hills with an inversion thrown in, so I think Lek would have been much better with a stronger second half. The same is true for Abyssus, which you won't see on this list partially due to that factor. The last 15 seconds or so of both that ride and Lek are bland. Layout-wise, of course, they still pull decent forces, but it does get repetitive. However, that doesn't hurt this ride too much, it's just something I noticed, and Lek Coaster is still easily one of the best rides in Europe. Now into the top 10, we have another Polish ride. Hyperion at Energylandia is the second tallest coaster in Europe, much better than the tallest, and one of the most impressive looking coasters in the continent. My first couple rides on it though left me very underwhelmed. After 14 total rides, I found that Hyperion was drastically different depending on what seat I was in. Those first couple rides I mentioned, I was in a wing seat. I do not know what happened here, but Hyperion does not deliver at all in those outside seats. I'd heard it was a bit more rattly out there, but the forces were better, but for me it just shook the whole time and the forces were limited if anything. If I had just gone by those first rides, Hyperion would not be on this list. But on the inside seats, it is smooth, it's intense, it's powerful, it's one of the best coasters out there. Hyperion has a layout similar to many other large-scale coasters by Untamed, starting off with large hills and turns, and then moving to tighter elements as it loses speed. This works very, very well. Aside from a few dull moments in the middle, Hyperion's elements hit hard. The first and final parts of this ride are outstanding. I was also able to get used to riding on the outside seats, so that boosts my opinion of it a bit. So, despite a few faults, Hyperion is undoubtedly elite. Up next is Conda. It was hard to form a complete opinion on this coaster because I was only able to get 3 rides on it. This was due to the fact that I went to Walibi, Belgium on literally the busiest day any park has ever had. Small rant here, but we had to wait an hour and a half just to be able to park, another hour to get into the park itself, and had to deal with almost every single ride having a wait time of 2 hours or more. I've been to Disney and Universal during peak times of the year, but nothing has compared to the absolute insanity of the crowds at Walibi, Belgium, and the park's admittedly poor handling of them. Back to the coaster itself, Conda is another modern Untamed with a fantastic layout. All the airtime moments hit with that same layout idea I just mentioned with Hyperion. The drop, first Camelback, and Outer Bank are ejector heaven and one of the best starts to a coaster I've ever experienced. The rest of the hills deliver the quick pops similar to the ones felt on RMCs, but the non-airtime moments don't do too much. The non-inverting Cobra roll is unique, but doesn't really deliver in terms of forces. The valleys and turns outside of the first few aren't intense by any means, but the airtime on Conda is so good that it deserves a spot in the top 10. The coaster in Europe that I rode the most was Wildfire at Kolmården Zoo in Sweden. This massive RMC has an unbelievable setting, uses the terrain to its advantage, and has 3 fantastic inversions. Unlike other RMCs that are strictly focused on airtime, Wildfire has a mix of different sensations felt throughout its layout. However, I do really love airtime, which is why Wildfire places lower than the other European RMCs. There are also a few moments in the second half that don't do anything extreme, but I can't really knock Wildfire for that because the layout as a whole flows so well. The drop is one of my favorites in the world, the french fry stall is awesome, and the next 3 moments offer strong ejector, whether that be straight, twisted, or sideways. Like I said, the second half isn't as good, but that final inversion may just be the best one on the ride. Overall, Wildfire is an amazing coaster, and without a doubt, Sweden's best. A lot of people say that Conda is the new and improved version of Expedition Geforce at Holiday Park, but I prefer the original and it comes in at number 7. The airtime on this ride just feels so raw and powerful. There are 7 moments here where you are absolutely ejected from your seat and they're all so amazing. But one of the complaints I've heard with Expedition Geforce is that the elements outside of the hills don't do much. And while I agree to a certain extent that a better middle section would have benefited this ride, I found that almost every valley and turn offered good to great forces. It's not like Conda, which is pretty much dependent on its airtime alone, and that's part of the reason why I put this ahead. But as you know, the main reason why everyone, including me, seems to love it is because of that raw ejector airtime. Expedition Geforce is still one of the best coasters in Europe and the world over 20 years after it opened. It serves as a reminder that even in the modern world of coasters, some old school power can still easily hold up against the best. Going from old school to new school, Untamed takes our number 6 spot. This is an RMC hybrid at Walibi, Holland, with some of the most airtime I've felt on a coaster. Untamed has a spectacular layout with unique and powerful elements in the first half, and then ending with some of the quick ejector pops RMC is known for. My favorite airtime moments are the Camelback, Outer Banked Hill, and pretty much all the hills at the end. But where I think this differentiates itself from other RMCs is in the inversions. While similar coasters of a smaller scale might have 2 or 3 inversions, mostly 0G rolls and cutbacks, Untamed has 5, including 2 moments which are fantastic. The barrel roll at the end gives some great hang time, and the double inverting corner 270 degree sideways stall, or whatever the heck it's called, gives a really special sensation of floatiness, followed by inverted sideways hang time. It's very unique. Overall, I love Untamed, and while it's not my favorite RMC, I can tell why it's usually considered the best of the small scale ones out there. Now into the top 5, we have the best RMC in Europe, Zadra at Energylandia. This placement might be a bit low for some. I know that a lot of people say that this is the best coaster in Europe. While I'm not that high on it, there's no denying that Zadra is a fantastic ride. Its biggest strength is its pacing, so I was understandably disappointed riding this thing early in the morning when it wasn't running at its full speed. Zadra takes a while to warm up, but when it does, it flies and is an absolutely incredible coaster. It doesn't have any insane forces. I mean, the most forceful moment is literally the final brakes, but it doesn't need to deliver thigh-crushing airtime or unbelievable laterals to still be elite. All of the inversions are floaty with some hang time, and while I would have preferred one of those 2 0G rolls to focus more on whip, there's still fun elements. Zadra, much like Wildfire, has a variety of forces such as airtime, laterals, hang time like I mentioned, whip, and some good positives. This really is an outstanding layout. It flows so well from one element to the next, so even if the forces aren't quite what I had hoped, Zadra still hauls and is easily one of the best coasters in Europe. One spot higher is Der Schwur des Kärnan, or just Kärnan, a massive Gerstlauer hypercoaster at Hansa Parc. I already have a full video about Kärnan on the channel, but the gist of it is this. I've been to Disney and Universal parks, but no roller coaster has immersed me as much as this one. Even if the ride itself wasn't great, the storyline and theme would have almost been enough. Of course, the reason why it is this high is because the layout is stellar. The first and last parts, which I'm not going to spoil here, take place in complete darkness and have some really cool surprises. The main layout though, the outdoor part, is so good. Aside from a small section towards the end that meanders a bit, Kärnan absolutely delivers. Each valley is filled with intense positive Gs, there's some really strong ejector airtime, and the whip is fantastic. That snap out of the overbank in the back left seat is seriously one of the best moments on any coaster I've been on. A lot of people have said that Kärnan has a serious rattle, but I found it to be the smoothest extreme Gerstlauer I've been on. I do think that this is the complete package, but as I rode it more and more, the theming wasn't really as special, and I was able to easily anticipate the surprises. It was still unbelievable every ride, don't get me wrong, but if I would have just had that first ride where I was completely in awe the whole time, it could have placed even higher. Obviously I wanted to keep riding it though, and I'm glad I did. Kärnan is easily a top 15 coaster in the world. Somehow a top 3 coaster in Europe is going under the radar. There's new for 2023 coasters like Geforce 1, Gotham City Escape, and Wildcat's Revenge that I feel are getting much more attention than Toutatis at Parc Asterix, which takes 3rd. I love this ride. Seriously, I don't know how to describe it, I just love it so much. The layout is one of the best in the world. It starts out with a slow section at the beginning, which allows the cutback to deliver fantastic hang time. The swing launch section is a welcome addition, and it leads to some of the best airtime on the ride. After a terrible trim on the top hat, Toutatis navigates its second half. This section of elements from the bottom of the top hat all the way until the final brakes works so well. It's got the best airtime moment in the country, a glorious stall, more airtime, some really whipping maneuvers, more airtime, an awesome final inversion, moments of great positives, and to end it out, more airtime. Unfortunately, it's one of those Untameds that's super unreliable, so ride it when it's open and I guarantee you'll come off loving it. For some of the past few rides, I've talked about how well each coaster's elements flow together and complement each other in order to create a well-rounded experience. But there's no coaster that I've ridden that does that better than Taiga at Linnanmäki, which comes in at number 2. This ride is the definition of a masterpiece. If you watched my review of Taiga, you'll remember that I called it a perfect roller coaster, and even though there's one ride that I like a bit more, I still think that Taiga is pretty much objectively flawless. It's ridiculously intense, it's so whippy, it's got great airtime, the layout as a whole is genius. Like I said, every maneuver works in tandem with the others to improve the ride as a whole. What puts Taiga ahead of a lot of other coasters is that it's not about the parts, the individual elements, it's about the whole and how they all fit together. It's a very special coaster for me and was my number 1 for a long time, but as of now there's just one ride that tops it. Ride to Happiness is the best coaster in Europe beyond a shadow of a doubt. I keep wanting to do a full review of it, but I haven't been able to since it's an experience that's nearly impossible to describe. It's insane, demented, and psychotic, all in the best way possible. Forget roller coasters, there's nothing I've done in general that even comes close to the absurd nature of this ride. It's got a world-class layout already, but when you add those spinning trains, it cranks up the intensity to a level beyond anything else. I don't even know how this was allowed to be built. The forces are unreal. The airtime is the most powerful on any coaster I've ridden. The inversions are all so good, especially the JoJo roll and double inverting dive loop. It yanks you every which way and you don't know where you're going next. Ride to Happiness makes Time Traveler look like a family spinner. The difference between those two rides is really that big. You know what? Scratch that. The difference between this ride and any other I've ever been on is that big. This is one of those coasters that every enthusiast should try to make an effort to ride at least once in their lives. It's far and away the best coaster in Europe, and even though I haven't been on every ride out there, I would honestly be shocked if it weren't the best in the world. So there you have it, the top 25 roller coasters in Europe, just my opinion of course. Other people obviously rank these rides differently, but this is the list I came up with. Feel free to share your favorite European coasters in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about some of these rides. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed, especially if you'd like more roller coaster videos like this one. I have a few big projects in the works that you do not want to miss, so if you are interested, go ahead and subscribe. As always, that'll do it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.